Hello, good afternoon. My name is Helen, and with me today we have Patricia. We would like to thank very much the British Council for the wonderful opportunity to be here talking to you today about Beyond Grades, Rethinking Assessment to Empower Learners and Institutions. Say hi, Patricia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia. Ellen and I are going to talk about assessment and how to empower learners and institutions. Okay, Helen? So, to start, we'd like to reflect on what's your definition of assessment? What is
Think,
assessment for you?
think about that, yeah, for a
Mhm.
moment. What is
Yeah.
assessment? Okay, we cannot waste too much time here, so let's move on.
Okay, as teachers, we carry out assessment. We have to measure the performance of our students and the progress they make, right? We also need to diagnose the problems they have and provide our learners with useful feedback. So, to summarize this, what Harris and Mecken said, we have this thing of effective assessment is not just about assigning grades. Yes, it's also about understanding where our students are in their learning journey. Yes, and when we measure assessment, when we measure their performance, we diagnose their difficulties and we give them meaningful feedback. We empower students to improve, yes, their abilities. Okay, Alan?
Not to mention the relevance of needs analysis, as Harris and McCann say here.
So in this session, we are discussing the difference between two types of assessment. So we have summative assessment and formative assessment. So we are going to discuss how teachers and institutions can reflect, can rethink assessment to support real learning. Okay, what can we do as teachers to support our students? What can we do as schools, language schools, as, to support our learners to achieve their goals, of course?
Considering what Harris and McCain have just told us. Okay, so it's very important to begin with the difference between summative and formative assessment. To start, the summative assessment, which is the far most common one, schools, teachers, language institutions, etc., work with this kind of assessment. As the definition says here, it aims to measure students' performance at the end of a period of study. So keep that in mind. It's also called achievement test. Some examples of this sort of assessment would be final exams, placement tests, and standardized tests such as TOEFL, IELTS, other Cambridge exams, Michigan, etc. This, as I said, is the most common assessment used by most people because it's very good for certification. So if you have to prove someone, oh, this is the level you currently possess, standardized tests and summative assessment is the ideal. It's also very good in terms of accountability. So if you're working for an institution, let's say an English school or even a regular school, you probably have to talk to your stakeholders about your results. So hence the strength of this kind of assessment. But on the other hand, this sort of assessment doesn't always reflect the language growth. It's not always what students actually can do in the language. For example, we have cases like Japan or even Brazil, where we are from, where people excel at written tests, but that doesn't mean they can speak the language at all. On the other hand, we have formative assessment, and I don't have to tell you, this is our favorite. But I don't mean to convince you to necessarily use formative assessment. The goal here is to show you tools. So this is the kind of assessment that feeds back into learning. It is an ongoing sort of assessment because it constantly gives information to both the teachers and the learners on the progress they're having. That's why this is also called the progress test. Some of examples of these are self-assessment, peer feedback, reflective journals, and of course, whenever we as teachers are observing and giving feedback, this is a sort of formative assessment tool. We're going to talk a bit more about that. But as a pro, we encourage learners to keep learning. So it's not about learning to take a test, just to sit for an exam. You are constantly seeking to improve your performance as a learner and, of course, as teachers. On the other hand, because they are not so standardized, they require consistency, and novice teachers might struggle with this sort of assessment.
Exactly. Of course, as Ellen said, our favorite one is the formative assessment. Yes, in which that's because we can reflect on our teaching, we can reflect on our students' mistakes, but we understand that at times it's not possible for people to use whatever they want to. So we need to rethink assessment for students and institutional growth in the sense of giving an idea and having an idea of the possibilities that we have with what we have. And so the limitations of traditional assessment in tracking students' progress, it's a common thing in our scenario as teachers. Yes, and this is and why does this happen? Yes, institutions, they need to prove, as they need to show a result. Yes, but it is possible, yes, to align assessments with learning goals. So it is possible to have a formative approach. Even though you don't have a formative assessment at the end of a period or along the period, actually, it's possible to use formative assessment yes, in your approach. Yes, so we have some practical strategies. Yes, formative techniques. What can you do in case you work at a regular school and you need to give grades by the end of a period? You can use formative techniques, feedback loops, checklists, progress tracking. A very good thing that we have nowadays is AI and digital tools, as we can use technology to help not only our progress, not only to develop lessons, design lessons, but also to make students understand how they assess themselves. As there is also the performance-based test, as that when we use real-world application to assess language skills. So if I work with teenagers, yes, if my students are teenagers finishing high school and they aim to go abroad and they want to take an a course in another country, my goal will be different from if I have students in a private school, a language school, and then they are business people. So we need to use real world applications to assess students according to their goals.